Welcome to our legislative breakfast. I appreciate all of you coming out on a day like today. We've had a lot of snow squalls on the way down here. A lot of us way up north had nothing except sunshine and 70 degrees. And we finally have a couple of legislators with us. So we're going to get started with our program this morning. If Harvey and Terry can come on in. We're starting, and we would like to have our two legislators introduce themselves, and let me remind you of the rules of the game. I'd like for each of you to move to a microphone and identify yourselves if you would like to speak or have a question for one of the legislators. And the reason for that is we're on television, and it really makes for good TV when you can hear what people are asking. So we'd like you to move to the microphones to do that. You have 2 minutes to ask your question or make your statement, and we hope there's a question there. We don't require that there is a question, but we hope that there is, and the legislators have up to 3 minutes to answer each of those. You'll see the red, yellow, and green lights up front. They're set for your time. Once you see yellow, try to wrap up your question, and when you see red, you have to stop and we have to answer that. So we have a lot of topics on schedule this morning, and two legislators. As I said, be kind to them, because they don't necessarily have an in-depth background in every area we may want to speak about today, but at least they will give us an answer. So, Harvey, introduce yourself and what committees you're on.
Harvey Smith. I'm on the House Natural Resources, Fish and Wildlife Committee.
You got coffee?
Thank you, Harvey. And Terry?
Terry Norris, I'm on the Ag and Forestry Committee. I represent Orwell.
Oh, great.
But I'd like to welcome you to Orwell and thank everybody for coming. The food is sponsored by the First National Bank of Orwell and Buxton Store put it together. But glad that you could show up and have a good little debate here. But thank you.
So eat as much as you possibly can while you're here. Thank you very much. The program again is, today's breakfast is sponsored by Buxton's and First National, and we thank them very much for that. The program, of course, is brought to you each week by the Bridport Grange and the Addison County Farm Bureau with help from both the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Commission. So, who wants to start off with the first question? Move to a microphone, ask a question. There's one kind of in the little corner there, and there's one over here. And I know that there are a lot of questions on what's going on in Montpelier. Go right to the microphone. If you'd identify yourself and then go from there.
I don't really have a question, but my name is Gary Stedman. I'm from Virgins, and Senator White, Jeanette White, introduced a bill on alimony reform in Vermont State. In the alimony laws, if you take a look at this paper, there's a lack of consistency, predictability, and fairness in the divorce process. And the Vermont laws have not been updated in decades, so just any support we could get from anybody with this bill would be appreciated. Thank you.
What's the number?
S99. Let me give you I've got several copies.
Senator Ruth Hardy just stepped in. I don't want to attack her all at once, but there was a question about a Senate bill that was introduced on alimony.
Okay.
And if you move to a microphone, I'd appreciate it because we're on TV. Get your coffee and...
That's 99?
Yeah, right here.
Thank you. Do you know who introduced Senator White? Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Senator Ruth Hardy. I'm sorry I'm a little late. The drive over was a little dicey. There was actually complete whiteout in Salisbury. So I just wanted to get here safely. I don't know about this bill, so I don't want to speak to it and tell you something wrong. This is the first I've seen it, but I'm happy to look at it, and I'll get your name, and I can talk to Senator White about it and see what's going on with it. That's the best I can do. I'm sorry, it's not a bill I'm familiar with. Some of you might know, and Representative Smith and Norris, I'm sorry, Terry, I totally blanked on your name, can speak to this. We've had record numbers of bills being drafted this session. I think we're over 800 now, as last I heard, just incredible numbers of bills. So a lot of these are coming out sort of late, and we haven't really had a chance to digest them yet. And there are way more than any one individual legislator could find time to read. So I will take a look at this and get your name and get back to you with more details. You're welcome.
Terry?
Just as a follow-up, she's right, there's a record number, 800 something. I mean, just this past week, I think we had probably 150 introduced in the 3 days. So we only had 2 more weeks before crossover. So trust me, the wall is, most every committee is going to be full, and we can only work on a certain number. And since town meeting week is next week, we're not in session, so it's kind of, it's just going to be, just a lot of bills going to be sitting for until next year, so we can't get too excited over every one.
So just to explain that, Terry, just to explain that, the legislature serves on a 2-year, a biennium, so whatever doesn't go this year is still on the table for next year, is that right?
Correct. It'll
Okay.
sit on the wall, we call it sitting on the wall, but, and then after next session, then they all get dumped and we start over.
Okay.
And just because there's 40 new members this year in the House, that's one of the things that we've been doing a lot of, at least in our committee, a lot of review from things that we've talked about the last year or two, just to get our new people up to speed. And I think that's kind of the way it is in most committees now. And we've had probably 3 to 4 days of informational days on the floor. So when we're on the floor doing that, we're not working in our committee. So plus we started a week late for whatever reason. I'm not sure why. I thought we should have started the week before, but it wasn't my call. So really, you know, honestly, our committee, we haven't done a whole lot. So we've got to really push in the next 2 weeks to get something out to the Senate. And then after crossover, all the Senate bills come into the House, and then technically we work on only Senate bills then.
Okay.
Can I just add to that? So just to clarify, the reason we started late is actually there's language in the Constitution that says we have to start the Wednesday after the second Monday of April. So this was the latest start date possible based on the calendar, but it's actually a constitutional requirement. So, yes, and as Representative Norris said, there have been so many new bills that there's just no way we'll all get to them. But we are starting to pass bills in both houses, and I've seen some House bills come over. Terry and I both serve on the Agriculture Committee, and his committee sent 2 bills over to us, and we're about to send one over to him, to his committee. So things are starting to move, and for those of you who don't know what crossover is, I just want to make sure people know what that is. That's when the date that's been set by leadership in both houses as the deadline for bills to move from one house to the other. So that's coming up on March 15th, I believe.
And there's all kinds of exceptions to crossover too.
Oh yes,
So-
there are.
There are committee bills and reserve bills that have maybe nothing in them except the title. So stay tuned, there's a lot to come yet.
That's true, yes.
Questions for our legislators? Did I see our legislator from Virgins come in, I thought? Matt? I thought I saw Matt come in, but he's probably, okay. Anybody got a question?
Good morning, folks, and thank you all for doing this. My name is Stephen Terry. I live in Middlebury, and maybe Harvey can help answer what is happening on Act 250 and what is likely to be the result.
Up here.
Well, as I said, I have a new committee assignment this year, and it's on natural fish and wildlife, and we're taking up the Act 250 bill. And they put together last legislature biennium, they put together a Act 250 committee. They did a bunch of hearings around the state. It was a little bit unusual how they did it. They didn't take comments from the audience as to what they would like to see changed in Act 250. What they did is propose a change and allowed people to respond to that. And I'm still trying to get my head around it, but we're taking testimony on it every week. If you have some thoughts about it, I'd love to hear them. And we have a bill. It's a committee bill, so it's not a numbered bill. It's hard to find. If anybody's interested in it, I can get your email and I'll send you a copy of the bill so you can see it. We also had an index and piece with it because it's a very long bill. So anyways, we had an index and part so you could look at it and see, and that's a separate piece. But I'm concerned about where we're headed with some of the thoughts that are going on with it, and but I need to know more about it. And as I said, we're being inundated with papers and reports and stuff. I mean, we have a stack of material to read through, and it's very difficult to keep up with it. So, but it looks like it's very well structured, very well organized, the process anyways, and something's going to happen. I can't tell you what yet.
Okay, questions, more questions. Any topic that you'd like? Come right up to the microphone.
I'm Jean Audette, and a resident here in Orwell. And I'm very concerned, I was hoping Chris Bray would be here, but I'm very concerned about the Senate Bill S96, which is the bill, I think some of you heard about it. It's the one where the proposal for the Clean Water Act, which is going to cost billions of dollars for the state of Vermont. He's proposing a $40 tax on parcels of land in Vermont. And there's parts in the bill, I don't know if Ruth Senator Hardy can address this, but I find this bill is putting on another layer of bureaucracy that I don't think we really need. And I'm a lister here in Orwell, and I can see red flags going up all over the place. Part of the bill, it's, and I appreciate you guys having to read all these, because I read it last night and it took me numerous times to really read it. But the thing that I'm concerned about is they're saying that parcels of land are going to be judged by their cropland, whether they're impervious, and I'm wondering who's going to figure this all out. I mean, I just think of Orwell here. We have approximately 800 parcels. I don't know how many acres are in cropland. I don't know if the soil's impervious or not. I don't think live on a farm. I don't know about my farmland myself. So I'm just wondering where that's going to go. And then the second thing that bothers me, apparently the municipalities are going to have to collect this tax. The treasurer is going to be in charge of it. It's going to have to be another layer of work for our own little town to take care of. And I really look towards the House for the initiative to put forth another bill more like what the governor's looking at. I noticed that there's several House bills out there right now, but I think that this is just too much, so.
Okay, the topic was water quality, and I see Ruth moving toward the microphone, and Harvey.
I can speak to it a little bit. I feel weird because you're behind me. So I've looked at the bill. It creates a commission or some kind of group to oversee the distribution of funds from that are collected through this per parcel fee in order to fund clean water projects, is my understanding of it. And it does set up a new sort of board and to oversee this. I can tell you there are a number of proposals for how to fund clean water. So this is just one that's on the table, and Senator Bray, I do know he means to be here, so he may be coming in at any minute. He can speak to it more specifically. This one is in his committee, the Senate Natural Resources Committee. There are, I believe, several in the House, probably in your committee at this point, Representative Smith. So I wouldn't say that it's a done deal, but it's one of the ideas on the table. In terms of who would collect it, you're right, I believe it would be collected at the local level, but the determination of parcel size and imperviousness, if that's a word, I believe would be done in consultation with both A&R and with the Agency of Natural Resources and the Agency of Agriculture for Farmland, but I don't know those details at this point. So at this point, it's just a proposal. Did he?
So I don't know.
So I'm going to defer to him then, so I'll stop talking.
Well,
Harvey, do you want to?
Yes, the answer is coming through the door. However, you're right, that is one of the bills that's in the Natural Committee on the House side. And we actually took some testimony from the folks that do the mapping in the state. And it's kind of, doing the aerial mapping of the state, it's kind of hard for them to be 100% accurate on what is an impervious surface and who owns it, what lot it lays on. And so there's going to have to be some on the ground work done as well, if that's the route we go with that.
I just see ching, 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 ching.
Yeah, so, and per parcel fee, that's one that the towns would collect. And the per parcels are, well, I'm thinking, you know, when we passed the Clean Water Act a few years ago, we charged the large farms $5,000 a year just to have the right to continue to farm. $2,500 for the medium-sized farms, and then they didn't come up with a price for the small farms, but that's probably something that's still on the table. And now we're asking those same landowners, and it probably is the same. I don't know what they did with the forestry. I don't remember they had a tax on those, but when we talk about per parcels, it's not like a farm owns 500 acres of land or 1,000 acres of land, and that's a parcel. That property is a lot of parcels. So I'm concerned about how that would be administered and how fair that would be and equitable be. I mean, when I look at homeowners, I have a different appreciation for them because most homeowners have a 2-acre parcel that they have. You know, if you're in town, you have much less than a 2-acre parcel, but it's still a parcel, and you know, there's some fairness to that. But when you get out into the countryside, it changes that a little bit, and it's going to make it more difficult. But Chris can answer the question. It was.
It's on your S96.
Terry, did you want to?
Could I re-ask a little bit, or?
Hang on a second, Terry's got a reaction, and then we'll get to
I'll just
Chris.
say that the Ag and Forestry Committee is, we've looked into that quite a bit because some of the water quality regulations for like farms They're putting in concrete barnyards and holding areas, holding places, and that's impervious surface. So we're going to be basically fining the farmers for doing their best to help with water quality. So we have to be super careful on what we're doing.
Okay, Senator Bray has joined us, and we didn't want to attack him all at once as he came through the door, but he actually has the answers.
Well, good morning. I apologize for being late. The simple truth is my phone battery died overnight. My alarm went off late. So, and then it was a long, slow drive from New England. So the question is, I'm not sure exactly what the question is, but if it's to talk about funding as proposed in S96, it is basically a duplicate of last year's bill, which looked at per parcel fee as a way of bootstrapping across the board funding for clean water work in the state. So when we passed the Clean Water Act, Vermont Clean Water Act in 2015, the theme for that bill was everybody in, and that meant farmland, forest land, municipal land, residential space, all land was part of the bill. And so the strength of that bill is that it is comprehensive. What we failed to deliver was on the second half, everybody in, everybody pays. We still haven't really figured that out. We have a relatively hit or miss funding system. For instance, the property transfer tax that we get roughly $5 million a year for clean water funding. I used to serve on the finance committee, and one of the things when you're designing a tax is you look to connect the work you're doing or the fee with the cause of the need to do the work, right? So in the case of a transfer tax, it's the chance that you happen to be buying a home that year, and as opposed to all in. And so it's a very small percentage of people who ever end up paying that property transfer tax surcharge for clean water. It's even a little more perverse than that. If you move to Vermont, you've had nothing to do with our water quality challenges. One of the first things you're going to get when you get here is a surcharge on your property transfer tax that says, "Welcome to Vermont, we're glad you came. Would you please help us clean up the mess we already made?" So it doesn't feel particularly fair to do. And when the per parcel fee, the strength of that is there are roughly 360,000 parcels in Vermont. So it's very broad, it's very directly connected to land, and it creates a steady, wide base. You don't have to ask much of anybody in order to raise substantial money sustainably for the long haul. So for instance, the bill proposed $40 per parcel, and that raises 14.4. We have roughly an $18 million funding gap that we're trying to close. So that's all by way of explanation why I think it's a reasonable idea. In no way am I ever saying it's the best idea. Just to pick up on something Harvey said, we do include a legal definition that says when parcels are contiguous, as in the case of farms that have assembled many parcels, they shall be treated as one parcel. That's already a legal definition under law, but in order to make sure that it was clear, we inserted it into the bill. So it may turn out that all this is moot in the end. Sorry, I see the red light. Because the Finance Committee has, by agreement between Natural Resources and Finance, we're not sending a fee down the hall. The Finance Committee is the one that's really in charge of raising revenues, not the Natural Resources and Energy Committee. We explored, I think, what a reasonable alternative is, but they in the end will do that decision-making about how to raise money. And I can fill in more details if people want it, but the red light's been on for a minute.
So Chris, before I let you go, and I think I can start the green light again, but is there a companion bill in the House? And is it identical to the Senate bill?
No. So the House is, so in terms of air traffic control, when you're doing major bills like the Clean Water Bill and the Act 250 Reform Bill, both of which are Natural Resource Committee bills, well, by agreement, the House is going first on Act 250 and the Senate's going first on clean water. So, and 2 weeks from now will be crossover. So our work that the House must consider this session needs to be to the House and vice versa. So they've been focused on Act 250 for the most part. Meanwhile, a single member of the House Ways and Means Committee, Representative Till from Jericho, I think it is, put in a bill with a sort of a menu of potential taxes related that would raise money for clean water work. But I think the plan is the Senate will send a clean water bill. There'll be money attached to that. The House will get that and respond. And by the time we go home in May, I hope it's May this year, like usual, I hope we have a solid plan that people find agreeable.
Thank you. Did that answer your question, or come back and ask it again?
I'm sorry you weren't here for the original question. Thank you, Senator Bray, for that explanation.
Please get close to the mic.
Does this really work? It doesn't
Yes.
sound like it does. Okay. I am just, I understand where you're coming from on this bill, but the implementation of it is what I'm kind of worried about. And it's back on the municipalities. And I'm wondering who's going to determine all the criteria that you put in the bill for the parcels of land. And I'm thinking of the impervious part, cropland, all these. Who's going to collect all this information? And then it's another tax bill that the town is responsible for. And the way you have it written in the bill is that it's, I believe, January 1st and June or something that the municipality has to hand over the money to the Clean Water Board that is going to be initiating all of this. So I find that it's all back on our town treasurer and our town listers to come up with this information. There's a little bit of provision of we get a piece of this, but I feel as though it's just another bureaucracy that we're adding on to government, and that there's a cleaner way, I think, of getting this money than doing this whole parcel thing. In my head, I think of Walmart, and it might have a paid parking lot, and it's putting tons of stormwater into, and that's one parcel. And then I have a parcel here in Orwell, and it's got, 100 acres, and it's just, nothing's happening on it, basically. And yet they might be the same type of parcel, and they're each paying $40 into the pot. So I just wanted some clarification on the whole bill.
Well, so thank you. There is a lot of subtlety and complexity when you start to figure out a program for raising the money we need for clean water work. And so one thing is, that bill, as proposed, won't be leaving our committee with that fee. The other thing to your point about impervious surfaces, so it included, this may I'll talk about it because it may well be resurrected down the hall in finance, an impervious surface fee as well. So in sort of a rational world, you might say, to the extent that you're causing pollution, you should be contributing to remediating the pollution. That old rule of thumb of the cost causer pays, right? So then the question is, well, how do you assess the adverse water quality impacts of any parcel? And they're not all, as you point out, not all parcels are created the same. A large parking lot has a very different effect than 10-acre hayfield, something like that. So that per parcel construct was I would call it a modest fee that could be reduced. Who knows if it will even survive? But it was $40 a year per parcel. Again, contiguous parcels would be treated as one parcel. But it also says that we will create, basically as the information allows, the ability to tax on adverse water quality impacts. One of the clear ones is impervious surfaces. So the state has been working for 3+ years on being able to map all the impervious surfaces in the state of Vermont. They get overlaid on town per parcel maps, and then you say, okay, here's a large parking lot, and there's a scaled fee dependent on how much impervious surface is there. We're hearing that there's technical challenges with implementing that, no surprise. And I think that we're having the Vermont Center for Geographic Information in this coming week to say, where are you on this? They've said 2019, 2020, they would be able to point out all the impervious surfaces. You might have a scale fee. Representative Till says something like, under X number of square feet, pay $10. X to Y, $20. Y to Z, $30. And above A, I'm running out of letters here, $1,000. And with Walmart being in the $1,000. So these are all proposals. I mean, there's some rational reason to think impervious surface contributes to flow loads, and then you might, there's sediments, parking lots contribute a lot of waste that drips off of cars, etc. It's not clean water that leaves a parking lot. So there are reasons to be looking at parking lots and impervious surfaces. And I think that finance will do that. So that it's not an either or. One was sort of baseline funding, and the other is, as we have the ability to see where the damage is coming from, those properties should contribute a larger than average share. The last thing I'll just say is in terms of when you're collecting a tax, you want it to be efficient. You don't want to have a very detailed system that's highly tuned, but it's very expensive to operate because you'll spend a lot of on administrative overhead. So there is a balancing act that goes on between measuring real world impacts and trying to come up with reasonable approximations so that it's not an incredibly time consuming and expensive process. So that's the kind of thinking that the Finance Committee will work its way through, and where I suspect that bill will be out by mid-March. That's their deadline, and we'll be off to the House.
Thank you.
So is it fair to say that you don't have to follow crossover since it's a committee bill? Is that?
No, it's a regular Senate bill, and so we are voting that bill out this week in order to get it to Finance. Finance actually has 2 weeks post town meeting week break to finish their work, and they would still be in time for crossover.
Okay, special rules for the Finance Committee.
Any bill that originates outside of Finance gets 1 extra week.
Okay. We're just trying to understand so that we know where to enter in, where it is and how far it's going and what your schedule is. Harvey?
Yes, you mentioned the bill that Representative Till had introduced. That's in the House Natural Committee, and I don't remember all the provisions in there, but the bill overall wasn't well endorsed by our committee. It had a milk producer handler fee associated with it. It had I think it was $1 a ton for asphalt paving, which would come out of the backs of taxpayers anyways, simply because all the municipal road budgets are passed, and the residents in the town have to support that. So it would be the residents again would be supporting that. But we did have a discussion about maybe some discretionary spending items that could be used. Maybe we ought to put some kind of a fee on canoes and kayaks that are out and using our waterways, and beer and alcohol. They already have tax, but that would be falling into the discretionary spending instead of putting a mandatory spending on everyone. We had talked about doing a tax on overnight stays, and we actually put that in 2 tiers. One for local residents who might be staying overnight someplace, and one for visitors coming in that might be there. None of them are really hot topics, but on the House side, that'll go to the Ways and Means Committee, and they've asked our committee. I don't know whether they've asked the Agriculture Committee, but they certainly asked the Natural Resources Committee to come up with some recommendations, and we still haven't sent that to them, but we've talked about it.
Okay. My name is George Gross. I'm from Shoreham, and I'm going to put on my planning commissioner hat, but I'm not speaking for the commission. I had a question for Harvey, circling back to the Act 250 bill. At one time, I had heard there was a provision in that draft that would allow some parts of the town to be designated as exempt from Act 250. If you could elaborate on that, and also, if you can, speak to how a planning commission would integrate that provision into their work.
Yes, and I have been talking with Adam Lucci about this, because most of the planning commissions around the state are very concerned about where we're headed with this bill. It seems to be a fairly large jurisdictional change. The one carrot they gave us was that designated downtown, where they would give more expedited permit process. And there's only 4 towns in Addison County that I'm aware of: Virgins, Bristol, New Haven, and Middlebury. And the Bristol is the easiest one for me to define, and that is if you go to the stoplight in the center of town, it's 1 block either side of that. So those areas are already well established. There isn't much room for new development or any new construction in there, so it would be, it's not worth much.
Well,
So
I mean,
unless-
to be clear, in Shoreham, we do have a large parcel in town that's undeveloped, and this might be relevant to that one. So the farm property is over 300 acres.
Well, it depends on where it is, but it doesn't fall under that designated downtown.
And we're actually planning to apply for
Yeah,
that.
so anyways, and that designated downtown wasn't put in there for the purpose that this bill is trying to use it for. And I think all our municipalities should have an opportunity to change or expand their area that they would like to have development. I mean, Middlebury has Exchange Street. That's not part of the designated village center. So, I mean, we've got a lot of work to do on this yet. So I was very surprised to see that just that little bit of a postage stamp size in our towns. Virgins is basically Main Street. There isn't, from the bridge to the stoplight, I think, the second stoplight, not the one in the center of town, but the one just on the northern side of town. So really what they've given us is something that we're not going to be able to make much use of, simply because it's already full. There's not a place to put a lot of infill in there.
So to your, I mean, this particular line, maybe it's a one-off, but in Shoreham, it actually is relevant, because we do see a part of our downtown village center that we're going through village center designation. And we would probably want to keep this provision of the Act 250 Act in mind when we do this planning.
Well, we have the downtown areas, which is substantially larger than the one that we're talking about.
So
there's 3 or 4 different layers in there, and the town of Middlebury is basically, just the village center. I mean, you're green and your Main Street, and it doesn't go out to Exchange Street. It gets part way there, it goes down probably about where the Middlebury Bank is, so it's not a very large area. So if we're going to have that discussion, and we're going to have, some opportunity for expedited permit process, we ought to do it in areas where the towns have designated they want the growth to happen, and that's not the case with this bill the way it's written.
Okay, well, thank you for your response. I think I might actually, I would like a copy. You mentioned the committee bill, if you could get a copy.
Yeah, you give me your email address and I'll get it to you.
That'd be great.
Okay. Someone else? Yeah.
So, going back to the lake, about 5 miles down the lake, I have an old sailboat, been sailing it for 20 years. Got a good look at the lake, and I'm going to say, I know Mr. Norris, I know last year I said, wow, the lake is dirtier than ever, and he said it was cleaner than ever. And I'm going to say it again, it was dirtier than ever. This past summer, it never cleared up. As a matter of fact, if you're missing any topsoil, I think I've seen it, all right down there. So, $40? I've been listening to arguments for over 40 years. We're going to clean up the lake, we're going to clean up the lake. And now it looks like maybe something's going to be done. For just $40, where do I send the check? Let me know. I have 1/10 of an acre. My lot is so small, the cat has trouble turning around in the backyard. $40, that's a bargain. How could anybody argue with that? Okay, to clean up the lake. I saw teenagers refuse to even jump in the water last summer. It was so bad. So, Mr. Norris, tell us, is it cleaner than ever?
Terry, would you like to answer that?
I honestly haven't been back since middle of September, so I don't know for sure. But I'm not even sure, you know, we're going to spend $25 million a year on water quality, but do any of us actually see the money? I'm not even sure where it goes. So it'd be nice to know, you know, actually where all that money goes. Maybe Chris could explain it, but.
I think Chris is moving toward the microphone.
Push it out of the way.
A worthwhile cue. So 3 years running, we've had the Secretary of Natural Resources and other people, but particularly Secretary of Agency of Natural Resources have said, if water quality is an elevator and it's been descending in terms of we're having increasing problems each year, has that elevator stopped going down yet? Or you even have better news, like it's started back up. And each year she has said that water quality, the elevator is still going down. The water quality continues to degrade. And so that is, you know, I just want to remind us that it's a large, sobering problem to take on. We need to be steady. We need to improve our programs year over year, and we need to make sure, to Terry's point about making sure that we know how we're spending the money. There is a Clean Water Initiative report, comes out January every year. It gets better every year. It's very deep, it provides, it's going to say very detailed, depends on, it's about 100 pages long. It will show you what we're doing in agriculture, what we're doing in transportation, roads and bridges and roadways, what we're doing through Agency of Commerce, and what we're doing in the Natural Resources Departments. It talks about dollars spent in each area, where it occurs in the lake, the practices. There's a lot of useful information. I know that it is difficult to see money spent year after year and not see that elevator stop and head back up, which is what we all want. But there's also a tremendous amount of momentum in terms of the processes underway that are delivering basically phosphorus-laden silt to the lake. So it's going to take a lot of change, farm practices, forest practices, road practices, you name it. We all have a role to play, and it will slow down that erosion, decrease the kind of sediments going out, and then it will take time for the water to recover. There are some bright spots, though. We have seen places where particularly intensive work has been done where water quality has really been improved. The last thing I'd say is, you know, somehow this comes across as somewhat funereal, like, well, things are bad. We have one of the most beautiful lakes in North America. Yes, we want to improve it. When I talked to Vermonters over the years, thousands of conversations, everyone says they want clean water. So when we all put our shoulder to the wheel and do this work steadily, no big fees in particular for the average person, people I think just want to know, don't ask for too much and spend the money you're going to raise well. So again, the per parcel fee, not perfect, but I think that's just a placeholder for a concept. A modest fee that we're all contributing to can make a big difference. But we're going to have to be impatient in terms of wanting to do better every year, but patient in that we are going to have to do this work for decades. The last thing I'd say is the roughly $3 billion that we're talking about spending over the next 20 years, public and private dollars, represents the largest infrastructure investment in the state's history. So while we're cleaning the water, we will also be employing our friends and neighbors on the work that we've all agreed we want to see done. So I think there is a very positive silver lining, but we have to be in it for the long haul.
Harvey?
Yes, I'd just like to say, you know, nothing's as simple as what we think it is. To clean up the lake is going to take a long time. Matter of fact, we had the lake keepers coming in, talking to us, and that's, I'm paraphrasing because that isn't who they were, but folks from A&R were coming in and talking about, you know, what was happening in the lake and the process we're following. And so I asked them if we've been working on this for 3 years now, whether we've seen any improvements in the water quality and how fast would we really be seeing some results in the lake itself. And he says, well, he says, probably in the upper reaches of our watersheds, we probably can see some improvements at this point in time, but to see that kind of improvement in the main lake, especially the bays that don't have good circulation in them, probably not for 20 years or so. So we're looking at something that we're spending our money on, and I'm not saying it's a bad investment, and we need to do it, but I will say one of the challenges we have is the state has this, allows our rivers and streams to meander around, and they change courses every now and then, and there's phosphorus in the soil, and every time that bank erodes and moves, that phosphorus comes to the lake, and that makes up 23% or somewhere around 23% of the phosphorus load in the state that we're not going to do anything about. And I'm not sure if we should do anything about, but it is a natural process, but that's what's happening. When we talked about the lake cleanup and the per parcel fees a few years ago, and it might have been with the clean water bill, we gave municipalities the right to tax for stormwater improvements. So I know in the town of Middlebury, because I hear large property owners complaining about it, what's this bill that we're getting? So we're already talking about the impervious surface that folks are paying, you know, at least a local tax on. So that's an issue. And then we talk about $25 million for the overall project in a year's time. But then, for a variety of reasons, DEC now is charging a permit fee for putting in water quality projects, which is basically 75 cents a square foot for the area that we disturb, and that's on the agricultural side. They would give a non-reporting general permit to agriculture if it was under 5,000 square feet. Over 5,000 square feet, they have to pay this fee in order to put the water quality project in. And to put it on perspective, it's about $34,000 per acre. So a lot of the farm community this last year just said, whoa, we're not going to put that project in this year. We need to find a better way to do this. They were willing to step up to the plate, put their own money in, work with NRCS and the State Agency of Agriculture to do the project. And because of this horrendous fee that's on there, we going to put it off. So we're putting stumbling blocks in the way. Oh, and by the way, that goes for your municipality too. They've decided that all our road ditches are wetlands. They need to be delineated. You have to hire somebody to come in and delineate your land for you before you can do improvements to the ditches. When we put this process in, the towns had to meet a whole new standard for water quality practices, so they had to come in with a whole different management plan that they had to follow, and it was state-driven. And so that's added some additional cost to it. So it's not as clear and simple as what we think that we're really looking at. If our goal is to clean up the waters of the state, let's do that. And let's not get a lot of things in the way.
Thank you, Harvey. Heidi?
Well,
trim my remarks a little bit. I'm Heidi Willis, and I live in Salisbury, but I'm also active with the Addison County Riverwatch Collaborative, which has been sampling 6 area streams and rivers for 25 or better years. So I will say what I've learned as a retired elementary school teacher, not a scientist person. This was a problem that took a long time in the making. You know, the federal government was urging farmers to dump phosphorus on their lands after the Second World War because that's what the companies were making. And so for 40 or 50 years, that's what farmers and others did. So it took a long time to develop, and it'll take a long time, as Harvey was saying, to solve. And so we just need to extend our time of expectations in terms of cleaning up. There's a lot of legacy phosphorus out there. I would advocate for money to go to volunteer groups such as ours. We are supported by some 10 area towns, but as a volunteer group, we have 30 or 40 volunteers who go out every summer sampling season and collect samples. The state, about 15 years ago, saved us by offering lab services, but we spend a lot of our time raising money to try to publish our results, connect with ag partners, that kind of thing. And $10,000 a year would be a godsend for us. So, and we do projects. You want to know where the money goes to? We will do bracketing projects up the river. Somebody talked about up in the top of the watershed. You can begin to see where the waters are cleaning up, and that's the kind of work that we do. You know, you identify an area where E. coli or phosphorus is high, you bracket on either side, you figure out where the source is, and then you can begin to deal with it. So it's just going to be a long time, and lakes tend to fill in anyway.
Thank you, Heidi. Did you have a... Are you moving up to the mic? Go right ahead.
Yeah, there are people in the hallway back there.
Oh, they're waiting in line.
There's a line, it's not just for the bathroom.
Okay.
Hi, Dave Silverman from Middlebury. You know, it seems like we have a lot of needs in this state, right? There are a lot of things that need funding. And one of the things that I love about Legislative Breakfast is how it's an opportunity to hold our elected officials to account. You know, our governor, 2 weeks ago, sent his tax department chief to the House Ways and Means Committee to advocate for this, a tax cut, a $370,000 tax cut for the heirs of estates leaving behind more than $5 million. I am pretty sure that our biggest priority in this state is not tax cuts for rich people. And yet, that's exactly what we get. We get a lot of talk about protecting the vulnerable, and we get a lot of action about protecting our donors. That has to stop. I really hope that none of the legislators in this room are supportive of tax cuts for millionaires when we have so many needs for so many people who really are suffering and really are lacking funds. To give these tax cuts to the Parmalas, and it's mind-boggling. And it has to end. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Go right ahead.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Barbara Wilson, and you know, one of my passions, as most folks know, is healthcare. And I have to say, I have a little disappointment in the session this year because there is a bill, H-129, that was introduced in the House, which is universal primary care, but they have yet to take it up. Even though we had 49 sponsors, co-sponsors on the bill. And, you know, so I've been stepping back, trying to figure out why, and I've been looking at what the committee has taken up, and it's obvious to me why. There's just so many other bills that they have to consider because we never solve the root cause of the problem. Because insurance is an issue, because, you know, we're really, the cost of insurance is so high. Much of the time time is being spent on how do we stabilize insurance, right? Because we know that changes at the national level are happening or potentially happening, and it's going to cause rates to go up. So we focus on things like mandates. Last year we passed a bill for a mandate that people have to buy insurance, right? So now this year we're spending time, in precious small time, because our legislation is, session is so short, on figuring out, well, what's a good mandate to, force penalty to force people to buy insurance, right? So, to me, if we actually could step back and solve the real problem, as opposed to really generating what is a real tax, but it's a false tax, by forcing people to buy insurance when they can't absolutely afford it and therefore can't use it, like $10,000, that's a whole hell of a lot of tax. None of us pay that much state tax, right? And if we really got down and looked at the numbers, which I've done as a math major, it's just like obvious that we need to go in and solve the problem and get rid of the administrative costs that we keep introducing more administrative costs onto this problem, and it's going to get worse and worse, and we help somebody and hurt someone. The governor's solution is, well, let's have people that are older like myself pay more premium, right? So we're paying $1,100 to $1,200 a month. What good is that going to do? And so that younger people would pay less. That's not solving the problem. The problem is we have all of this cost there because administratively, and we're not ever getting to that root cause. And I'm frustrated, can you tell? I would like to get to the root cause of the problem.
Do you have a question?
I think if we look at everything,
Do you have a question?
No, I don't. I just have a vent.
Okay.
We need to get to the right cause.
Any legislator want to make a comment on that? Terry is.
Just the way the committees work, what you need to do is really get after the chair of that.
I've been
the
doing
healthcare.
that, yeah. I'm part of, you saw me at the State House for many,
Yeah.
I lived there in
'Cause
January.
Basically, if the chair, at least in our committee, if the chair thinks it's worthy of moving, that's what we'll work on. We're just kind of doing what the chair requests. So if they don't find it a viable bill, they may know that they can't get it done this year.
It's a viable bill, but there's other urgencies because of the problem, it's broken. So they gotta do those first. And I understand why they're working on the bills that they are, but we never take the time to fix the problem.
Right.
And so, believe me, I've studied it.
Okay.
Maybe it'll happen in the next 2 weeks, but don't count on it.
I know, that's what.
Yes.
Ed Payne, Bridgeport. I've been on the Addison County Regional Plan, so some of the subcommittees, and one of the things we had was a state map telling us the appropriate areas for energy production. And they just look at things like that. One of them was on the farm area, that was on the farm that I used to own, sold to my neighbor. And yeah, it meets the slope, it meets everything, but it's 3/4 of a mile from the nearest two-phase line. And they have all these things that they identify. So now we're going to have somebody come into the committee and tell everybody where all the impervious surfaces are. And I've done a long drive. I don't care. I don't think that the whole of my drive pollutes. Most of it's flat. There's a whole section of it's flat. So I don't know what in the hell is going on, but I don't trust somebody flying over or whatever. And how are we going to calculate the impervious surface of each parcel and tax it? I don't care to pay the tax. I don't care to pay the extra tax. I think I pay too damn much now. And if people would, the legislature has got this consolidation of schools, but my damn taxes are still going up. So they haven't done a damn thing. I'm sorry.
So is there a question?
My question is, everybody's scrabbling for every penny they can get for this thing and that thing. We were promised that we were gonna.
So what's the question?
My question is, when are we going to have some real consolidation in the school system? Get rid of a lot of useless $80,000 principal in the town of Bridport for 80 kids.
Red light. I have to stop you at some point.
When are they going to do it?
Would any legislator answer a question about school consolidation?
Sure. It's my favorite topic. Is this on? Can people hear me?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So I serve on the Senate Education Committee. As some people probably know, Act 46 went into effect 4 years ago and required school districts to merge into larger school districts. I know it's been a very controversial and emotional issue here in the town of Orwell. I just commend all of you for getting through it. And I would be happy to talk offline to any of you. In Bridport, where I believe the asker is from, that school district did merge with 7 of the surrounding towns and is now part of the Addison Central School District. And the taxpayers in Bridport did see a substantial tax reduction because of that merger. There are still continuing conversations in all school districts around the state about what is the best configuration of schools and what is the best budget to make sure that we have both a high quality education for our students and also fair taxation rates for our taxpayers. So it's different in every town, but I can definitely attest to the fact that in Addison County, all the school districts and all the school board members have worked really hard to do what's best for each of our towns. So I'm happy to talk to anybody in Orwell about this topic because I know it's been really important here. I also wanted to just bring up another education thing because I know that our time is short. We were supposed to end at 8:30, is that right? Or no, 9? Oh, good. Okay, so I just want to, as I said, I serve on the Senate Education Committee, and we're working on a bill right now for college tuition for students who attend state colleges or possibly the UVM to get some free tuition, a college tuition bill. I've heard from many people here in Orwell actually about this topic. More people from Orwell than any town in my district, and I have 26 towns. So I wasn't sure if anybody here had contacted me. I've replied to every single email about this program. There's a lot of enthusiasm in Orwell based on what I'm getting in my email box for this program to make sure that we can help students attend college without accumulating a huge amount of debt. So the Senate Education Committee right now is working on a bill. It's S38. It was proposed by Senator Anthony Polina. That bill is a fairly expansive take on the issue. It would provide 4 years of free college tuition, so as you can imagine, has a hefty price tag. So my guess is that we won't go that route, but we'll probably try to pare it down a little bit. So we're looking at various proposals for how that might work. and we have several on the table that we're taking testimony on tomorrow. We've heard from the state colleges and UVM. We've heard from the Agency of Education. Tomorrow we're hearing from the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation. So we are really trying to, we've heard from students and professors at our state colleges. So if anybody here wants to talk to me about it, I don't know all of you, so I'm not sure if you've emailed me or not, but I've heard, like I said, I've heard from a lot of people from Orwell. So I just wanted to bring that up as something that is on the table.
Senator Hardy, since you're right there at the microphone, we've heard it several times in both conversations during our program and after, folks asking whether there is a study of the effect of school consolidation and whether there was money actually saved and in what districts and how much. Is there any studies going on, or have they been commissioned?
That's a good question. I don't think there's been a statewide study on that issue. I think that is potentially a good idea, and I can see what data is out there. There have been sort of local studies. All of the school districts that did merge were required to create articles of incorporation, and those articles did provide some analysis of the potential financial savings of consolidation, or unification is the term I prefer. But I don't know that there's been a statewide study, and because the school districts are all at different stages of unification, some did so 4 years ago, some are still in process, and as you probably know, there is a lawsuit from 33 school districts. Right now they're suing the State Board of Education because they do not want to unify, and those are all over the state. It's created a rather interesting political conundrum at the State House. That is right now before a Superior Court judge, I believe in Franklin County, and we at the Senate Education Committee are waiting to hear the results of the first ruling from the judge about whether or not he'll provide a delay in the implementation of the State Board of Education's ruling. So that sort of has to play out before I think we could do any kind of analysis, and we're hoping that the judge will say something this week so we know how to proceed. Yeah.
With all of us facing our town meeting next week, we're all interested in both the school reports and the town reports, so this will be, I'm sure, will come up at some town meetings during.
Absolutely, that's my favorite part of town meetings, is talking about school budgets.
Okay, we have another question?
Yeah, hi, Bill Goddard from Orwell. I guess my question concerning this is, we already have a process in place. Why create a whole new program? Why doesn't the legislature just put more money into the state college system budget?
Okay, there's an answer for that.
I think, thank you for that. The governor's proposal, I believe, his budget does actually increase the appropriation for the state college system by $3.2 million, and that's certainly something that the appropriations committees in the House and then later in the Senate will take a look at. That funding apparently would be able to stem a 3% increase in tuition at the state colleges. The program that the Senate Education Committee is looking at would go beyond that to really help reduce the debt of students themselves. So both supporting the institution of our state colleges, but also supporting the students so they don't incur as much debt. One of the leading reasons why young people actually are leaving rural areas is because of student debt. There was a recent study on that. So we're really trying to look at the viability of our small towns and making sure that we can still have young people in our towns that can afford to be here. So that's sort of the reducing of the student debt and making sure that they're able to go and get either a certification or an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree in Vermont is what we're trying to really get at, above and beyond simply funding, which is extremely important, but simply funding our state college system.
Heidi?
Yeah, I'll just pick up Heidi Willis again, Salisbury, and I'll just pick up on the school consolidation, unification, and town meeting. A concern that I had around the consolidation issue was the impact that it would have on town meeting. In Salisbury, we vote our town budget by Australian ballot. So when you took away the school budget, there was no real reason. No town meeting lost its teeth, if you want to say. So there have been a group of us in the last 3 years. We've made a party out of town meeting. We are desperately trying to hold on to it. But you know, our representative from our town is not comfortable speaking at town meeting about the school issues. So we have to actively, our principal has agreed to come speak about what's going on with the school, what's going on with IB, and our representative will be coming, but there's no formal way at this point. We're in new territory for there to be a school report on what's going on in the schools, both your local school and wider. So I hope at some point in time, if we're looking at the unification effort, and there's an evaluation of how it's going, say 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road, that we look not only what's going on with schools, but we look broader in terms of what that impact had on our communities. Because when you take away that face-to-face involvement with what's going on with the school, you've taken away a real core, a real heart of what's going on, how a community relates to itself. And I'm very worried about that impact on our towns and on town meeting. I mean, town meeting has been weakening as it is, and this could be a real dagger in the heart. So, just an observation.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Emily. I live in Orwell, and I'm one of the enthusiastic emailers that emailed about the S38 Act, which is free tuition for our Vermont students. And it sounds outrageous, I know, but I work at the Community College of Vermont, and we have an all part-time faculty. Nobody gets any benefits. Nobody really makes a living there, actually. And my students pay the highest community college tuition in the country. Vermont is 50th in the nation, 50th, for funding to higher ed. And at some of the hearings, I know our senators and our representatives feel badly about that. I mean, that's a sobering statistic to me. And again, I understand the implications of more funding and the fear. But I just want to say one of the issues as a younger person living in Vermont is it's difficult to make it. It's difficult to pay the cost for housing. It's so scary to think about how my children will pay for their college education. I have friends that start a goat farm on North Orwell Road, and there's no way they're going to be able to save as farmers for their kids. And so when you think about education and you think about the tax money, I mean, this is something that supports all of us, that makes our communities stronger. Who's going to take care of us when we're old if we don't have educated nurses and doctors and people that are from our communities getting educated? So I really hope we can keep pushing for more funding for higher ed. Thanks.
Okay, well, we've come to the end of our program this morning. We appreciate you all coming out for it. We'd like to thank the Orwell Bank and Buxton's for providing the food, and remind you that there is a white plastic container as you leave that is got money in it. It's for you to put more money in, not take your share with you. And that goes to helping support these Monday morning legislative breakfasts. Next week is town meeting week. And as Heidi said, it's very important that you all show up at your town meeting. So next Monday night, in many cases, your town's going to be meeting, and on Tuesday, you'll vote by Australian ballot. We hope that you'll all be out for that, so we will not have a legislative breakfast next Monday. The following week, we'll be at Platt Memorial Library in Shoreham, and then after that is, don't forget, the governor's breakfast. It's been confirmed that the governor will be with us on Monday the 18th, so that will be important. That's in Middlebury at the American Legion. And then we are switching. We were going to have an ag lunch on the 25th and a congregational church in Salisbury on the 1st of April, but we're switching those two. So the ag lunch now is on the 1st, on April Fool's Day. And you can probably remember agriculture, April Fools. So thank you very much for coming. Our program each week is brought to you by the Bridgeport Grange and the Addison County Farm Bureau. Thank you.